I live in New Mexico, near a Navajo reservation. I've always been fascinated by their culture and beliefs, especially their legends about skinwalkers. Now, they are very evil and dangerous, and I've heard they can even mimic voices and manipulate minds. One night, I decided to go for a drive around the reservation. I wanted to see if I could maybe spot any signs of one or other paranormal activity. I had a camera with me just in case. I drove about for around an hour, passing by some houses. It was pretty dark and quiet, except for the occasional howl of a coyote. But then I saw something that made me stop. There was a man walking along the side of the road. He was wearing a cowboy hat, a plaid shirt, jeans, and boots. He actually looked like a typical rancher. But there was something wrong with him. He was walking with a limp, dragging his left leg behind him. His face was twisted in pain, and his eyes were bloodshot. He also had blood dripping from his mouth and nose. He looked like he had been attacked by something. I rolled down my window and asked him if he needed any help or a hospital, but his voice was raspy and weak. He pleaded to me to help him, that he had been bitten. I asked him bitten by what, and he pointed to his leg. There was a pretty large wound on his calf, where something had clearly torn a piece of his flesh off. It looked terrible. I am surprised he wasn't bleeding more. I asked him where he wanted me to take him. He then began to mutter something under his breath after pausing for a moment. I couldn't really understand him because he was kind of mumbling, but I kept asking him after hesitating for a moment, "Can I help you? What do you need? I can't just leave you out here." But then the way he looked at me made my blood run cold. He said, and I'll never forget this, "It's still out there, and it wants you next. I want you." And he then looked at me and smiled wickedly, revealing that his teeth were stained with blood, and his eyes almost turned a pale, sickly yellow. I noped out of there as you can expect. I floored it in drive, probably from 0 to 60 faster than a Tesla could. I don't know who or what this guy was or why he was out there, but it creeped me out. Now, I'm not writing this to you to say that he was a skinwalker. I hope the guy got the medical attention he needed. Whether he was on drugs or whatever the case may be, perhaps he ripped off his own skin, I don't know. But the dude creeped me out, and I hope to never run into that guy again. I was working on a construction site late at night, along with my coworker, who we'll call Jim. We were hired to work on a small section of housing near the woods. It was supposed to be a relatively easy job, but we were running into constant problems with outsourcing, let's just say, below average companies who were dealing with the plumbing and wiring. So, we had to babysit and stay longer than expected. We were finishing up for the evening when both Jim and I heard a loud, piercing howl somewhere from behind us. Now, it sounded like nothing we'd ever heard before. This clearly was not a wolf or a coyote or anything else. It sounded completely unnatural. Jim, who is pretty much not afraid of anything, turned around and claimed he was looking at it, tapping me to turn and look. What we saw was a huge animal on 2 legs with what appeared to be the body of a man and the head of a wolf. Its eyes were dark, but also kind of glowing. It was staring right in our direction as if sizing us up for its next meal. Both of us were frozen in place, unable to speak. This thing took a step toward us, growling lowly. I swear we could smell its foul breath from where we stood. It looked pissed. Jim snapped out of his trance, reached for his pistol in his belt. He always carried that thing with him. He shot. He shot again. A third time. The bullets hit this thing but did not seem to slow it down much. I'll never forget the scream it let out in pain and anger as it lunged in our direction. Jim forcefully shoved me out of the way and fired once again, hitting it right in the face. The thing screamed, stumbled back, and disappeared. We did not waste any more time. We grabbed our tools, told the foreman we're gone, and took off as fast as we could. We didn't stop until we reached the nearest town, which was about 12 minutes away. We actually went to the local PD and talked to the sheriff about it, but he pretty much just laughed in our face. That was to be expected. I know this story seems incredibly far-fetched and ridiculous, and I get that, but I'm just recounting to you what I experienced, and it still terrifies me. It was a warm summer night when I had my first encounter with the unknown. I was driving through a remote desert area here in New Mexico, making my way to a nearby observatory to do some stargazing. But as I drove down the winding dirt road, I saw something that I could not explain. A bright light that seemed to be following me and almost hovering in the sky above me. I thought it might be a shooting star or possibly a satellite, but as the light grew in intensity, something was obviously wrong. I pulled over to the side of the road to try to get a better look at what was going on. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before, this sleek silver craft that seemed to almost pulsate with energy. It was as if the craft was alive. I was frozen in awe and fear, unsure of what to do. And then with a suddenness that took me by surprise, I was pulled up into this great wall of light, as I guess you could call it, enveloping me. And that's the last thing I remember before everything went dark. When I woke up, I was in a white room. Everything was white and very bright. I was surrounded by beings that I can only describe as different. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Tall, slender, white pale skin, but it almost appeared as if their flesh itself was made out of this bizarre metallic material. They spoke to me, not in any language I could understand. It was telepathic. They were communicating in a way where I didn't exactly understand what they were saying, but at the same time I understood what they were conveying to me, if that makes sense. It's as if their own thoughts were invading my mind with a force that left me feeling dizzy and disoriented. It was then they informed me for the reason they took me. They told me I was a part of a special bloodline that they had been monitoring for generations, that apparently I had been chosen to receive a message. The message was simple and horrifying. The end of what we know as the world was coming very soon, and there was nothing that I or anyone could do to stop it. Over what felt like hours, they showed me visions of the apocalypse, tsunamis, cities collapsing, fault lines collapsing, whole states and countries submerging in the ocean from drastic earthquakes, the sky turning blood red. It was like something out of a nightmare, very reminiscent of the movie 2012, actually, but far more realistic. I felt a sense of hopelessness and despair that I had never experienced before. It was like an actual movie, except I was living in it. It was around me, I was in it. But I understood in that moment that they were showing me the future. When the experience was over, I kind of just remember waking up back here, next to my car, alone in the desert, with really no memory of how I got there, but I do remember what had happened up there. I felt the physical effects of what had happened. I felt nausea. And apparently, after going to the hospital, I had some pretty severe symptoms of high radioactivity, including dizziness, nausea, a strange metallic taste in my mouth. But I couldn't explain to the doctors what had happened. And every now and again, I'll get this strange metallic buzzing or ringing in my ear that I've never had in my life, and it's almost pulsating, and it gets so loud and it hurts, and then it suddenly dies. I'm not exactly sure how to explain it. Like I said, when I drove myself to the hospital, they kept asking me what did I do and why do I have these symptoms. I couldn't tell them my experience because I'm sure I would have been put up in the nut house. This was years ago, by the way, and I am still dealing with the aftermath of all of this. I have become literally obsessed with finding answers, so I've been scouring the internet for any information on UFO sightings or extraterrestrial encounters, just trying to make sense of what happened to me. I even reached out to Phantoms and Monsters, I've reached out to Reddit, and so far I've not really got a reply back. But the more I search, the more I read up and realize that I might never find the truth, and that the times the truth might have peeked itself into the horizon of the internet, they were squashed, they were taken down, and blacklisted. I do not feel the same now when I look up at the night sky, and I could still sometimes see that hovering, glowing light. It does serve as a constant reminder of the unknown reality that sits there. I don't know if I was dealing with interdimensional beings, or really what it was, or why I witnessed the end of the world. And if those visions are correct, then humanity should be terrified. And if it's not, then I'm not exactly sure what they were trying to achieve. And I don't know what's so special about my bloodline. I'm just a regular, ordinary person. I am aware that this world is full of things we cannot possibly understand. In some ways, it has made me more aware of the fragility of life. The fact that we're all just small players in a larger cosmic drama. It's made me appreciate the moments we have here on Earth, and to cherish the people and the experiences that make life worth living. But in other ways, it's left me with a sense of unease and uncertainty, a feeling that the world is not as it seems. I'll never be able to fully explain what happened to me on that warm night, or even make sense of the horrific visions that were shown to me. But it's a part of me now, a part of my story that will stay with me for the rest of my life. It was supposed to be a weekend of solitude and relaxation. I had rented a secluded cabin in the woods, miles away from any civilization, with the hopes of disconnecting from the stresses of everyday life. But what I didn't know was that I was not alone. There was something else up there, something that had been watching me from the moment I arrived. The first night was a Friday. It was fairly uneventful. I spent the evening reading by the fire, an actual favorite Stephen King book of mine, Pet Sematary. The only sounds were the occasional snap of wood and the howling of wind. It was eerily quiet, but not so quiet that it alerted me. Just peaceful quiet. But as the night wore on, I began to feel a sense of unease. I got the feeling that something was watching me, just beyond the circle of the firelight. Nothing happened that night, so I felt relatively safe, or so I thought. The next morning, I woke up to go have a cigarette out on the front porch, when I noticed there were long claw marks all along the cabin. This definitely alarmed me. From the way it looked, it was like a bear had drug its claws all along the side of my cabin. Perhaps maybe a bear did come by and had smelt my food and was trying to get in. The realization was terrifying, but not terrifying to a degree that it would get to. We'll get to that in a second. I figured I wasn't alone. There were other wild critters around, but never once did I entertain the idea that a monster or something was out there, or whatever it is. But over the next few days, over that Saturday and Sunday, it began to increase. I would hear something big moving around outside at night, in the woods, with an unnerving stealth. Sometimes during the day, I would catch glimpses of a large dark shape darting through the trees just beyond my sightline. And somehow, I called into work Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and continued to stay at the cabin. Why? I have no idea. even though this thing was out there. I guess I just felt drawn here, like I was supposed to stay. I don't know how else to describe it. The fourth night, this thing finally revealed itself. I was sitting by the fire, just listening to the sound of light rain, when I heard it. It was like something trying to claw its way out of the trees. I knew I was in trouble, but this whole time I felt like I was in a trance, like this thing had some sort of mind control over me, like I was just a puppet and it was the puppeteer. Hence why I said I was scared, but I feel like I had to stay. Fortunately, I grabbed my rifle, creeping towards the side of the house where I was hearing most of the noise. You can bet my heart was pounding in my chest. That's when I saw it for the first time. Towering like a machine or a bodybuilder was this wolf creature, standing on two legs, staring at me with yellow eyes. It looked like something out of Hollywood, a nightmare come to life. Immediately, I dropped my gun. There was no match for it. I backed away and this thing began to advance, its footsteps heavy and deliberate. Then, with a suddenness that left me reeling, it launched itself at me and at the door at the same time. Well, I was right in front of the door, so you get the idea. I moved, but it smacked into the door, flying off its hinges. Instead of dropping my rifle like I had wanted to, I must have instinctively pulled it up and fired a shot. But it had no effect on this creature. It was like shooting a concrete wall. Whatever this thing was sizing me up, because it kept looking at me from foot to head, as if it was disgusted at me and my presence being there. I don't know why it lunged at me and destroyed the door. It started to rear back its body, as if it was getting ready to lunge at me again, and I could tell by the angry expression on its face that it was not going to miss this time, and I was not going to have the opportunity to move out of the way. It was like my reflexes acted yet again. I pulled up my rifle, and I had a pretty good aim right at its face, and that's exactly what I did. Well, the bullet hit home, because I blew its left eye out. Instantly, this thing began screaming the worst sound you'll never imagine. It held its face and was grimacing in pain, screeching and staggering, blood pouring down the side of its face. It then leapt off into the tree line faster than the flash. The entire woods around me filled with roars and trembling. I could see the trees shaking violently as this creature bulldozed itself out of sight. I knew this was my one and only chance to get out of here. I felt like whatever trance I'd been in this entire time I've been up here, which, by the way, I'd been in a trance, in case you didn't know. It was now my chance to leave. I quickly, probably in less than 5 minutes flat, gathered everything I had, threw it into my car, and got out of there. You can imagine I'm still in shock